All right, well, it is that time. So thank you everyone for joining us. This is our first topical town hall. Very exciting. We just have a couple quick disclaimers to go through, and I'm going to let Brigid go through that.
Hello, everyone. So just a quick notice to let you all know that this session is being recorded, and by participating in it, all of the people on the panel have agreed to participate in that recording. The recording will be shared later on the SCA YouTube channel, so we'll be able to make sure that everyone has the opportunity. So to give you a little bit of an introduction, I'm Brigid Costello. I'm the Society Social Media Officer, and I look after all of the social channels, and I'll be one of your facilitators tonight.
And I am your other facilitator. My name is Jessica Van Hattem, and I am the Society Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer. So between the two of us, we will be going through a bunch of questions for you guys.
So basically thinking about what is a topical town hall. This is a new thing we're doing, so expect to see more of them. You said to us that you'd like to talk more directly with us, and this is one of the ways that we can do that with you. So town halls are virtual question and answer sessions. They're structured about topics that you've told us that matter to you. So what we've done is we've managed to make sure that we've collected questions via the SCA webpage that you've told us you wanted to hear more about. And we'll make sure that this panel and upcoming panels have the relevant information and people to make sure we can provide you the answers that you need. This is about you ask and we answer.
Just to give you kind of a quick outline of what's going to go on tonight, we are going to start with Liz, the Society Seneschal, giving a short overview of what the investigatory process is, some basic sanction questions that people often have, and then we're going to go through questions that you guys have submitted to us. While we're doing that, if you have more questions, go ahead and type them into chat. Brigid will talk more about that, and then we will answer as many as we can before we run out of time.
So we have, so in the chat feed on the Facebook live stream, that's where you need to put your questions. We've got moderators who are currently reviewing that. If they can, they'll provide a quick answer for any of just the admin of why do you look funny, I can't hear you, that sort of thing. They'll let us know if that's going on. But over the range of the session, as you put questions, they'll try and pick those out, identify any themes, and where we can, we'll be able to answer them. We are testing the new closed caption functions on Facebook. We're hoping it works, but if not, that's definitely something that we'll be doing in the future. So with that, we might ask the panel to introduce themselves.
Okay, I'm Liz Schraer. And I'm known in the SCA as Ella Serenine Dermata. I live in Callantyre, and I have been Society Seneschal for about 2.5 months now.
Hi, I am John Fulton. I'm known in the SCA as John the Bear Killer. I am the Society President, and I hail from Glenavon. Go Rams!
And my name is Dan Watson. I'm a member of the Board of Directors. In the Society, I'm known as Sir Bartholomew Hightower, and I am speaking to you from Artemisia, which mundanely is, at least where I'm living, the state of Utah.
Thank you very much, everyone. One of the things that you all sort of said was you'd like a general sort of information about more about the investigatory process for how this all works, because our topic tonight is investigatory process and sanctions. And we thought, who better than to give that overview to you than Liz, our Society Seneschal.
Okay, I'm going to start out with a quick definition of what sanctions are. Basically, sanctions in the SCA are actions that limit someone's participation in some way or some aspect of their participation. The most familiar ones are the crown sanctions that are given, which people tend to call banishments. Banishment from the royal presence is the lowest level one, and that means that the person who is sanctioned that way can't come into the royalty's presence. They can't go to court. They can't attend a meeting that the crown is at. They basically need to stay away from the crown, but they can still attend events. And they're not allowed to contact the crown either, but there aren't a lot of limitations on their participation other than avoiding the crown, essentially, for the duration of the reign. It only lasts that reign. The next level is exile from the kingdom, sometimes called exile from the realm. That one prohibits somebody from participating in that kingdom for the duration of the current reign. The kingdom that issued it. They can't attend any events. They can't attend local meetings. They can't participate in the social media that is officially recognized, whether it be their barony's Facebook page or the kingdom Facebook page. It lasts for the duration of the reign. They can do something in another kingdom if they wish to do that. And the most severe one is called temporary removal from participation. It used to be called expulsion. The terminology has changed a little over the years. It's often referred to as a TRP. That if somebody is given a TRP, it means they cannot do anything, any SCA official activity at all until that matter is resolved. It is typically given by a kingdom, although it can be given by the Society's Seneschal's office at the direction of the board. Sometimes the board something will come before the board and they'll direct my office to issue a TRP. It stays in effect until the board has made a final decision on whatever it was. If it's an exile from the realm or a TRP, it has to be upheld by the board. It has to be looked at by the board and upheld by the board. The banishment from the royal presence typically does not go to the board. It's reported to the Society Seneschal, but it doesn't usually result in a review of the board by the board. There can also be administrative sanctions. Those come from an officer acting in conjunction with the Crown usually. They limit participation in one particular area. One example would be removing somebody's fighter card for a period of time because they've broken the rules of fighting or whatever. Suspending or removing an officer. They can be issued by the officer basically for the duration of, up to the duration of the officer's term. If the next officer comes in and wants to extend it, they can, but not for more than like 2 years. Only the board can ban somebody permanently from an activity. Only the board can say, you can't be an officer ever again, or you can't play ever again. Nobody below the board has the authority to do that. The board can also do it for a certain number of years. They might say, we don't want you fighting in crown tourney or being an officer for 5 years. Your membership is revoked and denied for 3 years, that sort of thing. They can choose to do that if they want to. Reasons for sanctions, basically violations of the SCA's rules. We have a code of conduct. We have some core values, and it talks about courteous behavior. That has never changed. The SCA from the beginning, certainly I started playing in 1980 and this was in corpora then, it's always said there are 2 requirements. You have to make an attempt at the appropriate dress and you have to treat people with courtesy and respect. The wording has changed a little over the years, but the rule hasn't. So we have added to some defining things as it's needed to be done. We have a bullying and harassment policy that describes certain behaviors that could cause sanctions if it's a pattern of behavior. And there's a hate speech policy that could also cause somebody to be sanctioned if they violated it. Convictions of crimes, serious crimes or crimes against people. If someone is charged with a crime, typically what will happen is that either the kingdom or the board will issue it, or the Society Seneschal will issue a TRP, and we'll wait for the outcome of that trial. Basically, what's sanctionable is actions that could endanger the organization or its members or violate our rules about how people should conduct themselves at SCA functions. How investigations work. An investigation typically, a complaint will be filed about something that somebody believes has wronged them in some way. Usually that will start at the kingdom level. The kingdom seneschal is responsible for investigating it. The kingdom seneschal is ultimately in charge of any investigations in that kingdom. They may have deputies, they may have investigators that they assign, they may delegate people to do the investigation, but they're ultimately responsible for seeing that it gets done and for overseeing it. The kingdom seneschal and the crown together will decide if a sanction is appropriate. The investigators should be talking to the people who are involved. They should be getting statements from whoever made the complaint. They should be getting statements from the subject of the investigation, the person who was complained about, and any witnesses. We like to get statements in writing, but they may also interview them and take interview notes. Also, any evidence that's around, if there's emails, if there's something that supports this that is beyond just talking to people. Some kingdoms have very stated and specific procedures for how they deal with complaints and how they want them filed, and those should be followed. If your kingdom has that, you should follow those. One point I want to make is that while identities of people who are filing a complaint or witnesses can be kept confidential, we just can't investigate an anonymous complaint. If it's completely anonymous and we have no idea who made it, there's no way to check up on things. So it can't be completely anonymous. It can be kept confidential. At the society level, when an investigation is done by the society, we have several volunteer investigators. They work under, I have an investigations deputy. His name is Ed Kraling. In the society, he's Master Eric of Telemark. And he assigns the investigations, and then the investigator contacts the involved people to try and verify the facts and the information and get any additional documentation or information that's out there. I think right now we've got maybe 9 people working on those, and they're all volunteers. They usually are going to interview people, typically via phone or video conference. And if somebody is interviewed, they should get a copy of their own interview notes and offered the chance to verify that they're correct or to, say that something needs to be changed. Nobody but the board and the corporate officers gets a copy of the final report. That's a question that's sometimes asked. The report itself is the confidential property of the board. Also, people aren't given somebody else's notes. You might be asked questions about what somebody else said, but you won't get a copy of the notes. I wanted to mention that in the past, there has been a problem with notifying complainants of the outcome of investigations, and I'm working on overcoming that, coming up with standard procedures that will make sure that that's done when an investigation is finished so that they don't have to read it in the board minutes. Anyone has the right to appeal anything to the board. A kingdom sanction, an administrative sanction, a board action, a decision not to act by the board or a kingdom, you can appeal it to the board. Only the involved person can appeal. If your best friend filed a complaint and the kingdom decided not to do anything about it and you think that wasn't fair, you can suggest your best friend appeal, but they've got to do the appeal. You can't. And if your best friend was sanctioned and you think that that wasn't right, you can't appeal on their behalf. They have to do the appeal themselves. The appeal of a board action, if the board has taken an action such as a revocation and denial of membership, that has to be accompanied by information, new information. It's stuff that it's reasonable to assume that the board might have made a different decision if they had known that or if that had been brought to their attention. The board decides whether to consider an appeal or not. I wanted to go over some common perceptions that are out there that may or may not be exactly right. The first one is, if a law has been broken, call the police, go to the police. I can't emphasize that enough. The SCA is not a law enforcement agency. We can't investigate crimes with we really can't investigate crimes, period. We can take people's statements about what happened, but we're not a law enforcement agency. So if somebody has done something illegal, it needs to be reported to the police first and foremost. We also can't enforce things such as restraining orders. If there's a restraining order, then the person who has the restraining order is responsible for contacting the police to enforce it. You wouldn't ask people if you went to the mall or the grocery store and the person who you had the restraining order against wasn't there, you wouldn't ask them to call the police for you. You'd have to call them yourself. Same way with the SCA. As a private organization, we have a fair amount of freedom deciding who gets to play with us as long as we follow our own rules and procedures. We're not held to the same standards as a court of law. We don't have to find somebody guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. We don't have to let people face their accusers. We don't have to do that as long as we follow our own rules and procedures. We do, however, require that there's some evidence when there's something. If you get 2 people and one person says this happened and the other person says, no, it wasn't like that, it was like this, and that's the only 2 people who know anything about it, we're not really gonna be able to figure that one out very easily. So we do usually require some evidence beyond just 2 people with contradictory stories in order to act on something. As the bullying and harassment policy spells out, there are things that can happen that might not be pleasant interpersonal actions that don't rise to that level of bullying and harassment that we would act against. There, friendships break up, relationships end, people have quarrels, people have a bad day and snap at somebody. Sometimes people just don't get along and they need to kind of avoid each other if they can. So in order to file a success, if you feel like you've got a complaint, it kind of has to rise above the level of they're having a bad day or we're just not friends anymore, that sort of thing. I also want to say that there's a lot more information at the SCA.org website. People should read the rules. The governing documents have corpora and the SCA's corporate policies. If you dig a little deeper on that page, you'll come to the Society Seneschal page and you will eventually find the sanctions guide, which talks about all of this in a little more detail. And if you really want to dig deep into it, there's something on there called a case file that goes through some of the things that the Kingdom Seneschals are supposed to report up to me if a sanction is done. So those are places to get more information. I'm also working on updating the Seneschal's handbook to include a little more information about sanctions. And so that's a really quick overview of a very complicated topic.
Thank you so much, Liz. Yeah, definitely go and check out those documents. We will also be linking the documents that are mentioned or the area where they'll be stored so that you can go and you can find them very easily. So now we're going to go ahead, we're going to jump into the questions. All of these questions were submitted to the Topical Town Hall page in advance. If you have more questions, please do just type them into the Facebook live chat. We will get them and we will have our panelists answer as many as we possibly can before we're out of time. But we're going to get started with a few questions about reporting. So first question. Which complaints on behavior are escalated to society level and which stay within the kingdom?
Okay. If a sanction is done by the kingdom, it's reported to me, to the Society Seneschal. And if it's an exile from the realm or a TRP, then the Society Seneschal will take it to the board and the board votes to uphold the sanction or not. If it's temporary removal from participation, they'll vote to uphold it, to uphold and extend it, or not. In the case of a TRP, usually they'll vote the typical thing that happens. It doesn't have to happen, but usually, more often than not, what you'll see is a motion to uphold the temporary removal from participation and extend it and order the Society Seneschal to conduct an investigation. The typical wording is up to and including possible revocation and denial of membership. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to result in a revocation and denial of membership, but that's the usual wording, standard wording for the motion. Also, other things that come to the society level are if someone appeals a kingdom decision, either because they think the kingdom acted when they shouldn't have, or they think the kingdom didn't act when they should have, they can appeal it up to the society level. If it crosses kingdom boundaries, that sometimes will come to the society level because it's difficult for the Seneschal, if the complainant and the subject of the investigation live in different kingdoms, it can be difficult for the kingdom Seneschal of the complainant's kingdom to conduct an investigation when it crosses kingdom boundaries. And occasionally it'll come to the society level if it isn't felt for some reason that the kingdom can be unbiased. Sometimes the people involved will feel like the kingdom has too close a connection. People who would be involved in the kingdom have too close a connection to people involved in the dispute. Or sometimes every now and then the kingdom will come to us and say, we don't think we can handle that. And usually we'll try to support them in doing it if we can, rather than take it over ourselves, but it is possible for that to come. So the things that stay at the kingdom level are that, hopefully that's where most everything starts, and it comes up under those circumstances.
Thanks, Liz. It appears, like one of our members has asked, that it appears that the board is dealing with more sanctions now than when they were last on the board around 30 years ago. What do you feel is contributing towards that?
Well, I don't go back far, 30 years far back, but 20, 25 years ago when the board worked, the majority of people who got sanctioned were an occasional horrible crime, modern crime, and someone would get hit. and financial issues. Before the internet, before anything else, everything was done on paper. Everything was done through mail usually. So checked by people on financial stuff, and there were problems with that. But since that time, in the last 20, 25 years, now there are now online lists for people who have been child predators. There's we have had in the SCA a lot of broken stairs, things that we've kind of passed over and thought they were very isolated. Well, we find out that now it turns out for a long period of time that in many cases, abuse of women and abuse of authority in the society, and the willingness to support people and get people to actually speak up. My wife had problems when she first got in, but she didn't feel she could tell anybody. So now we have, at least in the last good 10 or 15 years, we've had more people be willing to come forward. We've had just more access to information. And so we've gone from financial issues to impropriety, to bullying, harassment. And this has been handled by the board long before we had the actual policy. There were people actually coming forward and reporting things that were being done and that we could have done a better job to encourage people to do, but is acknowledged as a problem and something we're trying to get behind. The rules are for everybody, and the more people know that, the more people should be encouraged to step forward and let everybody know that they are having problems. So from money, we've gone to more access to modern crime. We've had a lot of people with behavior stuff that perhaps might not have been reported or were passed over for, many times long time ago because we weren't really as on the ball as we should have, especially as an organization. So yeah, there's more people being removed technically. And again, I urge everybody that if you ever get a chance to look at the minutes of the board report, you will see that the board is addressing, but as Liz said, it takes time, but there's just more information, more of an eye toward taking care of people within the organizations as members and participants to make sure that people are treated fairly. And we've always had the rules, but now we understand that there's a responsibility for all of us. And that's, the board has taken note of that and had to handle a lot of some very overt issues and some that are not. But please check the minutes, see what the board is handling every 3 months in the SCA. And yeah, when I was on the board a long time ago, it was not like this, but society has changed and everything has changed. And we're trying to do a better job and be a little bit more responsible.
Thank you so much, John. All right, our next question. Crowns in the SCA have an immense amount of power. How would the average SCA member report a crown for potential abuse of that power?
Oh, Jessica, I can handle that one. So, one of the things that the sanctions process relies upon is the chain of command. Sanctions generally will start with the Crown in coordination with Kingdom Seneschal. Will issue a sanction, and then it works its way up to the board for approval, and then they look at it and decide whether or not they're going to investigate it. But that's a real problem when one of the persons who is in that chain of command is actually the one that is accused of misbehaving. And so when that happens, every kingdom has designated for them board ombudsman, which you can find if you go to www.sca.org and look at the board page. You can find out who your board ombudsman is. That person is your point of contact for making sure that that the process is followed. So that if you will talk to that person, they'll figure out the best person to bring it to. Usually the society seneschal, if it's the kingdom or the crown that is the source of potential misbehavior. And so when this happens, the board ombudsman is neither Yeah, after I said they're not an advocate for the complainant, and they're not an advocate for the person for which the complaint is lodged against. But they're there to make sure that our processes are followed, and that the issue is brought forward in as quick a manner as possible. Now, it is possible in the worst case to say that Liz is the one that is under the gun here as a society seneschal. It is possible to bring that up directly within the board of directors and deal with it there. That happens. Well, I don't know if I've ever seen that happen before, but that certainly is possible to circumvent the entire group. But typically, what the board member will do is they'll find the lowest person that is not in that chain, in that chain that has not been accused of misbehavior, and they'll bring it to their attention and work it forward from there.
Thanks, Dan. So one of the questions was that despite the new climate regarding sexual assault and harassment, there can still be a strong culture of victim blaming and cover up in this person's particular kingdom. They feel that the problem is that the people who engage in this area are peers or kingdom officers. How can the society combat this and create a safe environment for victims of assault and break up a sort of good old boys club?
Okay, I can try to address that. First of all, like John said a little while ago, the rules are for everybody. They're not just, and if you go through, as he said, the board minutes, you will find that high-ranking people get sanctioned too. As far as a particular kingdom culture, it's possible to, if you feel like your complaint has not been heard by the kingdom, it's possible to elevate it. It's possible to talk to your ombudsman or to the Society Seneschal's office and say, this happened and this is how I can document it, and I don't believe that it's being fairly treated. There is also a fairly new sexual misconduct policy that the board has passed that people probably need to be educated on, and there's going to be some training created by my office and the DEI office in conjunction on dealing with that for Kingdom Seneschals. I would also say that I also joined in a long time ago, and some people who have been around for a while may just need to be a little re-educated on things that they used to think were funny and that people used to sort of laugh off, don't get laughed off anymore. And that may take some doing.
Yeah, it's all about constantly learning and growing as a society to make it a safe place for everyone. Let's move now to speaking more on the investigation process. We got the question, I've watched from a distance several cases go through the sanction process. Some seem to end quickly. Others can take up to a year before there's a final board resolution. What do you think contributes to the speed of the process?
Well, I can try to answer that one too. I was an investigator before I became Society Seneschal, so I know firsthand some of what goes into the investigations. The more complicated the matter is, the more likely it is to take longer. If it's a fairly simple cut and dried, a lot of the money issues get solved pretty quickly because there's documentation out there. If it's not quite so cut and dried, it can take a while. I had one particular case I was investigating for the society that it seemed like every time I talked to a witness, I started calling it the Russian nesting doll case, because it seemed like every time I talked to a witness, I would come up with 2 more people that I really needed to talk to. And that entire thing took me about 3 months. It takes time to schedule the interviews. Everybody's got lives. And so that can contribute to the length of time an investigation takes. Also, I said earlier, we have about 9 investigators. Every single one of them has a case right now, and I have at least enough on the docket waiting at the moment for every single one of them to have a new one the minute they get done with it. So if we have a lot of things, it tends to go in waves. Sometimes there's a lot, sometimes there's not so much. But if we have a lot of things that are coming up, it's going to take longer just because there won't be an investigator available. They're all volunteers, and they come and go too. Sometimes we've had investigators who their job blew up all of a sudden and they didn't have time anymore. We've had investigators, we had one recently who said he finished his investigation and said, I'm going to step back for a couple of months because I'm about to get some serious work done on my house and I'm not going to have the time for a couple of months. So it can vary that way. I think those are the main things that I see that take time. Also, if it happens to be a criminal case, then typically we will wait for the courts to make their decision because we assume they know what they're doing. And that can take, criminal cases can take 2 or 3 years sometimes. So if something's hanging for a long time, that's a criminal case, that would be why.
I raised my hand. I was prodded by Jessica to feel free to talk and add something. Just one thing, as Liz mentioned, we need to keep in mind is in a lot of these cases where there is a modern crime involved, most people will be removed temporarily from the society. In a lot of cases, especially certain criminal cases, until this can be resolved. So it may take a while to work out, but that doesn't mean that the person can still, again, depending on the situation, is still able to interact and participate with all of us. And one other thing, if you are interested in the process of how, if you think you can do a very confidential type work and have some ability to actually read and look at the rules, feel free to contact Liz or her deputy Eric, and possibly we can maybe get you in as an investigator. But there are very strict rules on confidentiality, so don't think this is something fun because you don't get to pick your case. And but it is something we need help with. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking of confidentiality, right? Our next question has a little bit to do with that. So the next question, I understand the need for discretion, but the complete secrecy surrounding the R&D process leads to confusion and controversy. Human nature hates an information vacuum. Every time there is an R&D without a well-known specific reason, our society fills with rumors and accusations. Why does the BOD not provide a complete record of the proceedings leading to an R&D with names redacted?
Yeah, I got that question. I understand that. I understand the question. I understand the desire for that, the desire to know. But, we can't always be, we don't always want to be forthcoming, even if we could be. There are people who could easily be hurt by this, by some of the details that come out that we learn in an investigation. And so we hold these case files that we get in the strictest of confidence. We just, we want to protect all the people that are involved. I'm not talking about the person who eventually, I won't talk about them too. Even the person who's under suspicion for R&D, they also need to have their privacy protected. But mostly we want to have, if there are victims in a case, we want to make sure that those people also, that their privacy is taken care of. And one of the things that you really have to understand is the reason that we have a sanctions process and the reason that we sometimes R&D people. It's twofold. The most important reason is to provide a safe environment for the participants that are there for the events. That's the most important thing. So if we find an individual or individuals that we feel are going to compromise that safe environment, then we work to resolve that, either by giving them some time off or by removing them from the society and keeping them out of what we are trying to do. The second reason that we have for performing, for running through the sanctions process, is to protect the society. And we've talked about this within the board a lot, and we have ongoing discussions with SCA legal team to talk about what kind of information we can release. And they always come back to us and say, every time that you release information, you put the society at risk. And so we're, for those two reasons, most importantly, the protection of the individuals involved, and secondly, the protection of the society as a continuing organization, we've decided to make these processes as secretive as possible. So we keep them in executive mode. When we talk about these during board meetings, we get everybody out of the room that does not absolutely have to be there. And then we discuss it among ourselves, make a decision. We keep it within that room.
Thanks, Dan. So what do local Seneschals do when someone in their group is under investigation?
Okay, I can take that one. If you're a local seneschal and someone in the group is under investigation, first of all, if they're under a sanction that would keep them from participating, you're responsible to making sure that they don't attend. If they're not supposed to attend meetings, if it's the exile or the TRP, if they're not supposed to attend local meetings or participate on your local media, you're responsible for making sure that that's happening, that that's followed through, and reporting. If it doesn't, if you can't, keep them from doing something, then you need to report it up to the Kingdom Seneschal. Otherwise, controlling, you have to keep a neutral face, and you have to be discreet. You need to not discuss it with people, and you need to make sure that, you need to try and control the gossip. You can't control it all the way, but try to set the example and control the gossip. And also make sure that people are not bullying this person if they're under investigation, because we don't know yet whether they've done something or not. And if you're called on to do something with the investigation, like to tell what you know or whatever, of course, cooperate with the investigator. That's basically, I think, the local seneschal's responsibility.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we actually got several questions about sanctions themselves. So I want to move on and ask some of those as well. The first one, can any of the levels of sanctions be reversed? And if so, how and which ones?
Yeah, let me try to answer that question. So any level of sanction can be reversed, and it can be reversed by appealing to the board. And what you need to do is you need to, if the sanction has been levied against you and you feel it's unfair, then you need to write a letter to the board and present your case. These typically will not happen. Board generally won't pick these up until after they've made a decision. So if there's it won't really help to appeal to the board before your case is heard, because you haven't had a chance to look at it in the first place. So we need to wait until that process has gone through. But it can happen. It does happen. It happens when we make mistakes. We look at what we've done in the past or what other board members have done, previous boards have done, and make a decision that was not the right. May have made sense at the time, but doesn't make sense now. We've have had cases that have been appealed to the board and have been successful that we've gone through. I want to answer another question also that I saw someone ask in the chat, and that was updates on cases that have been resolved. And the best way to get information about what cases have been resolved by the board is by looking at the board minutes, or which generally take about 3 months after they get accomplished by the board, because they have to go through. We have to create the minutes. We have to approve the minutes. That only happens at a board meeting. The faster way to understand what is going on at a board is to look at the president's report, which usually comes out a couple of weeks to a month after a board meeting, in which the president of the society goes through and details some of the things that happened on the board. And the absolute fastest way for that to happen is to go to a board meeting or be able to attend one, which is the kind of thing that we're working on now. I'll put in a quick plug here. The board meeting that is happening in October, we're planning on live streaming that for the very first time. And so that would be a fantastic way of seeing what business is happening in the board as it's going on and finding out very quickly.
Okay, so thinking about this, sort of absent any victim privacy concerns, how does the sanctioned individual obtain the reasons for a sanction, specifically the details that allows them to properly prepare any appeal?
Okay. The subject of an investigation is entitled to a statement of the facts of what happened. They are not entitled to be told who made the complaint, and they're not going to get the entire complainant's statement. With that's not going to be done. That has been done a couple of times in the past. There's a happy medium that you have to get to. It used to be that people were basically told violations of the governing documents. Well, that's no good, because that doesn't give you any idea of what you might have done if you're not sure. And on the other hand, giving all the information leads to retaliation and things like that, or can lead to it, I should say. Not everybody's going to do that, but some people will. So what would try to do is give them enough details that they can construct, you know, a response. And if they have evidence that, you know, whatever they're being accused of isn't true, they can provide that without giving them so much that they or their friends would then, if they decided this was a good idea, be able to go off and harass the person. It's a hard line to walk, but that's what we try to do. They're entitled to know some of the facts. They aren't entitled to the entire package.
Thank you. What steps are being taken by the BOD to make the sanction process more transparent or understandable?
I guess I'll take this. Well, this, for instance.
You're muted, John.
Oh, that's not good. I got
That
caught.
means you owe us all.
I know.
All
So
a drink at the next board meeting. Once you know that.
those who screw up and don't unmute themselves before they talk are punished severely, and I have been caught in front of the world. So anyway, what was my question? Okay, so we are doing this now. The rules, any rule changes, the sanction guide, everything is usually put up on the website. You can find it. Stuff is pushed down from the Society Seneschal in terms of sanctions and things that go on down to everybody. So we're really trying to continue to let everybody know what the process is. The one of the things we're considering, because this has been said 2-3 times by Dan or by Liz, the SCA is not a law enforcement organization. We handle behavior issues in our organization. Ultimately, whether or not you can stay a member is decided by the board of directors through a very, very published and accessible set of rules. You know, there are some things that don't make sense, but because it is a subjective process in many ways. Which is why we don't publish the reasons. You know, everybody wants to know, why is somebody removed? Well, if we publish the reasons, then it may end up on social media. It may end up in a big argument. Defenders of the person sanctioned may come out, and then everything goes horrible. And the ultimate pain will be felt by perhaps and probably by the people who were able to actually get their complaints and get their concerns looked at. But we are looking at, and I think we'll probably end up doing this sometime in the very near future, is when a sanction is done. And by the way, you know, again, another advertisement for the minutes. Every quarter, these are published. When a sanction is done, there is a published motion of what the board did. So-and-so has had their membership revoked and denied. We're considering, and I think we will end up doing this, is a list of 6 or 7, perhaps, you know, that's pulling that number out of somewhere, of generic things that may apply. Financial issues, modern crime issues, violations of bullying, harassment, something that is generic that would tie itself and be announced with it. But we're still looking at that. But that's in the future, but I think it will get done because it'll maybe help things. But no matter what is done, it's either it's not gonna make everybody happy, because long story short, the SCA is a private organization, and somebody has to make a decision when someone should not be in that organization anymore. And we would prefer, or hope that we wouldn't hurt anybody in doing this process beyond just the basic process of removing somebody. So, but we're working on a general set of possibly a list of items that may tie to that, but I don't think we'll ever end up broadcasting who said what, why said what, and why the board ultimately decided Joe Smith is no longer in the society, because doing that or opening it up to some type of terrible public debate will cause infinitely more damage than anybody can just imagine. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. And just so everyone knows, Bear Killer is absolutely the world's best boss. And I say that not just because he now owes us all drinks, but just throwing that out there.
It's because he owes us double drinks, isn't it, Jessica? Yeah. It's also nice for John to actually prove as well that, see, even some of the highest among us in the society are only human. And that's all we can ever try to be. So I just want to go back to a little point that was made about the R&D. So what keeps someone who has been R&D'd from the society, so or had their membership revoked and denied, from just showing up at an event where they're unknown? Like, I'm sure they couldn't hold office or get a membership. But let's say Penzic, for example, has no such controls.
Yeah, let me handle that one also. The days in which someone could show up at an event who is not supposed to be there or is acting in a way that is contrary to the society, for example, claiming a peerage they don't own, you know, those days are gone. It does not take very much time at all for someone to show up who and someone to recognize them, or someone to see what they're doing, or someone to ask where they're from, or someone to ferret out where they are. We are a very connected society, and people can find this information out pretty quickly. Specifically for R&Ds, there's a document that the society keeps, the Big Book of Banishments. And Liz, you might have to back me up on this, but this book is available to the Kingdom Seneschals, and I think the local Seneschals have access to it if they need it. And so if there's a question about it, you can turn around and look this up and find it. Now, can I get a head nod?
Yes. It also, I understand that at Penzic, they actually get hold of that and they program that in to their registration process.
I think we lost Stan for a minute. We're going to figure that out.
I just want to say something about the Big Book of Banishments. That's what it's called. But all it is a list of every single motion that was ever done or acted on by the board. So one person can have a list of 6 or 7 things if enough stuff has been done. But that's what it is. It's not, it's just all the actions that have been done. And it is a read-only file on the SCA website. And it is, as Dan said, shared to Seneschals.
So I'd just like to add also that there was not a case where I muted myself, just that my headphones ran out of battery. So I do not technically owe everyone a drink the next time we're able to get together.
Thank you for that very specific clarification. We'll deliberate on that, and we'll figure out whether or not we're gonna honor that. Next question. Does the Crown have the power to restore the honors and titles to someone whom the Board of Directors has degraded? And if so, what limits, if any, are there on that power?
Okay, I guess that's mine. So the Board of Directors usually limits removal of titles or awards to what is listed in corpora, you know, awards of arms, grants of arms, things like that. But if the board does decide to remove a patent or a peerage, it can be given by a crown, can be redone. Any award can be redone. There is an exception to something if the board, for whatever reason, removes a title that is derived from participation in crown list, count, county, duke, duchy, or those in particular, because they are, if you look at corpora, what those are for, they are for a very specific thing. Whether or not the crown acknowledges them, the person will still have those. So if the board, out of all the things that the Crown can give back if the board does hit somebody with something like that. The royal titles are something that cannot be granted by the Crown. They are per corpora given for a specific action, i.e. serving as a royal. So if they're removed, they can't be re-given. Those have to be re-earned, but all patents, per se, the orders of peerages, things like that can be redone by the Crown. Anything can be given again if they're still in the SCA, but there is the exception to the royal titles, those things in particular.
Thanks, John. So looking at sort of the questions in general, like if there are good reasons for not providing a listing of offences that led to each R&D, why does the BOD not provide a general description of offences, e.g. several sexual harassment charges over the course of 5 years or irregularities in the management of society funds, etc.?
I think we kind of answered that before, but we're working on a generic list that can possibly use. But we, again, because most of the people that are sanctioned or removed from the society are not basically a modern crime, publicizing things that aren't criminal in nature bring in a whole lot of other problems than that. So, but maybe we can come up with something that'll tie each revocation and denial perhaps, or to a specific area of the society. But I don't see us going into great detail in the future. That just would not be productive, I do not think.
Thank you. And we have to consider these things from a range of different perspectives, from the best benefit to the people who are involved, and making sure that everyone is safe as possible. And as Dan said, the secondary consideration around the safety of our organisation. So we're wrapping up with a couple of questions on training and record keeping. These are the pre-submitted questions. As we mentioned, we've been seeing your questions in the chat and we'll get to those if we can.
Yes, we've got a couple more. So our first one, the bullying and harassment policy seems to rely on conflict resolution processes, which are not clearly defined and can leave questions on how to proceed. Are you looking at possible training for this?
Okay, I can answer that. As a matter of fact, yes. I have a lovely lady who recently stepped down as a Kingdom Seneschal who has experience in both mediation and conflict resolution and giving classes on this. And she's developing some training for me for Kingdom Seneschals that can then be recorded and made available a little more widely to regional, local, whoever needs it. So that is in fact being worked on. I understand the question. Most of us didn't get ever very good mediation type training. I'm a retired elementary school teacher and mine pretty much stopped at Mrs. Schraer on playground duty, which sometimes works in the SCA and sometimes doesn't. But yes, that is something that I see a need for and it is being worked on.
Thanks, Liz. I sometimes think that being a former primary school teacher is an amazingly good qualification for Kingdom Seneschal. So our sort of last of the pre-submitted questions is, how long does the corporation retain records of sanctions? Can or does the board ever review past decisions? And what if attitudes about a behaviour changes?
I guess I'll do that too. So the society has a retention policy for documents, but in particular, the sanctions, paperwork, all of this is, when Liz's office presents something to be given to the board for consideration, including the investigatory information, the board will deliberate. That all becomes part of a packet at a board meeting. The board meetings packets themselves, minimum of every 3 months, every quarter, are kept on file in hard copy at the society office. The minutes, which has the actual motion against somebody, is also kept forever. So it is possible, maybe if you go past 20, 30 years, it is possible to get information if it's needed on what happened, whether or not the board or the organization can share that information is an entirely different issue. But the board does review past cases, as has been mentioned again a lot of times. Anybody has a right to an appeal something. You go to the board or go to the Society Seneschal, who's the liaison on appeals, say, I would like to have you look at this. It does happen. And the board, but ultimately the board will decide whether or not to reopen and readdress a case, which is why kind of the onus falls on the person who wants to get their case looked at to demonstrate why. Another part of the question, does it review if they're asked, and if what of attitudes about a behavior change? That could be part of your appeal. I was like this or did this, or this is what happened. The board can look it up and review it. But if you want something to be appealed or want to appeal something, you would go to the Society Seneschal. Her office would present the question, including any documentation of the request, to the board, and then the board makes the decision. So it has happened. It is sort of rare to have a revocation and denial brought back, allowed somebody back in, but it has happened on a few cases, 2 or 3 in the last 15 or 20 years, but it is possible. And it is possible for anything. If you find stuff that deserve to be looked at, it is possible to get anything looked at again, but it can be done. And we do keep files that show up at the board meeting for this type of information for a very long time.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, John. And thank you everyone for the questions that you submitted in advance. And thank you to Dan, Liz, and John for doing such a good job of going through those. So now we've been collecting the questions that have been coming in, and we're going to go ahead and try to answer as wide a variety and as many of those as we can in the time that we have left. So let's just go ahead and dive right in. For the extension for the ban when an appeal occurs, does that mean someone appealing will have the severity increased by having a longer ban for appealing?
Okay, I'll try to answer what I think they're asking. When somebody appeals, if they've been removed from the society, then they're already banned for a certain length of time. So it's not going to extend the ban. They're already revoked and denied of membership. So nothing to extend there. If they're talking about if they're appealing a Crown's TRP, it's probably not going to, particularly if they're doing it before the board has already ruled on it, then the board's going to look at the appeal if they choose to at the same time. And if they decide that the appeal has merit, then the person's TRP is going to be lifted sooner, not later. If they're appealing something else like an exile from the realm, well, that's over at the end of the reign anyway. So they could appeal that it happened, and the board could say it shouldn't have happened if they had decided to accept it. But again, it wouldn't be extended. So I don't think that anything is extended by appealing something. That's as best as I can understand the question.
I think you did a great job for a question you got within the last 5 minutes. Another question from the chat was, someone had seen 2 parties accuse each other of bullying, particularly if one party accuses the other of problematic behaviour and then calling them out on it in a problematic way. Do these rise to the board level? And if so, they want to know, how on earth do you untangle this kind of thing?
Well, I can handle that because we have to look at it. First of all, many times just spats and fights between different groups don't rise to the board level because they never get sanctioned at the kingdom level. But sometimes they do. And when they do, they land in front of the board after an investigatory process. And I will have to say that the things that we look at in terms of sanctions that come before the board, it's an easy problem. There are things that are so far beyond the pale that we don't have to discuss it at all, really. We spend very few minutes on, we say, no, not gonna deal with that. And there are things on the other end that really don't rise to the level of what we feel requires the board to take action, so we don't deal with that. It's all this stuff in the middle. It's always the really hard questions about whether or not a behavior constitutes bullying or harassment. And that's why we've tried to spend time hammering out what we think bullying is, what harassment is, coming up with definitions for that. One of the key definitions that we look at is this an ongoing thing, and is there a power imbalance at work here? So if you have one group or individual or group of individuals that have more power, perceived power within a relationship, and they use that power to force the other people to do things that they don't want to do and act in ways that are clearly not within their desire to do. That's the kind of thing that we sit up and take notice of, whether it's sexual harassment or just general bullying in nature. So those are the keys that we have to look at. And how do we untangle it? Sometimes we sit and we talk at each other and we yell at each other, and then we try to figure out what it is that we're actually looking at and work our way through it. And hopefully we get it right. We feel that we spend enough time where we need to try to make the decision that makes the most sense for the situation that we're looking at.
Thank you. All right. Have you ever considered having an anonymous ethics hotline? There are pros and cons, and we may not have the resources, but has it come up before?
Oh yeah, it has. It's come up a good bit. I think once we get a lot of our procedures and processes up and better running on that end of it, we may look at it again. But again, the problem for us is right now, anonymous complaints are hard for us to deal with, but we may get to a complaint hotline. But the main thing everybody needs to understand, this is very important. If you contact my office or Dan or any of your ombudsmen or Jessica or Liz or Brigid, you have a problem that needs to be very confidential. It will get routed to the right person, and whatever confidentiality you need will be handled as best as possible. It will be handled very, very carefully. There may, which makes a big turnaround to why we're very careful about not publicizing some things. But if you have a question and you need to talk to somebody right now, contact myself, Jessica, a board ombudsman, or Liz in particular, and bring it up that you have something that you are afraid or nervous about, and we will make every effort to help you, and it will be kept confidential if humanly possible. But maybe at some point we can do that. But right now our resources are a little stretched, both with people and then financial and the whole COVID problem. So, but it's been brought up and discussed. Yes.
Thanks, John. Confidentiality is a huge subject, particularly when we go through this kind of process. One of our people in the chat asked that names redacted might not be enough to keep confidentiality. Testimony itself can be revealing. What do we do in those situations?
I can try and address that. The person is absolutely right. Sometimes there's some of the situations we don't tell them the names, but they're going to figure it out. That's simply the way it is. One thing that is always cautioned to everybody at the beginning of an investigation, or certainly should be if those are procedures I'm working on, is that any attempt at retaliation or harassing somebody who has made a complaint or who is a witness to a complaint is going to be more likely to get you sanctioned than not. If you do that, it's just going to be added to the pile, I guess. And we do what we can to protect people, but she is absolutely right. There are times when just the mere fact of asking about something they're going to be pretty sure who it was. There's a limit to what we can do, but we do what we can.
Okay, thank you. All right, next question. professional associations that work with this type of thing in the corporate world, like the SCCE, advocate best practices on these sorts of topics. The SCA practicing privacy in this way is standard. So the question is, does the SCA take advantage of these sorts of professional resources, guidelines, books, articles, training, etc.? I'm actually going to say a quick thing about this. So officially, we don't subscribe to any one particular guidebook or training, but all of us are in the positions that we are in the corporate entity because of our experiences professionally, generally. Sometimes those come from working in the SCA framework for a very long time in a lot of different capacities. And sometimes those come from just having worked in the modern world in a lot of different ways. I know that for myself, my education and my professional experience has deeply informed the way that I construct trainings within my role. It's informed the way that I interact with others, and I respect their backgrounds and their opinions. Obviously, the things that we do are informed by the experience that we have at hand, and we consult, say, our lawyer when we need to talk about things that could be of legal concern, and we go to each other when things are in each other's wheelhouses. So I would like to say not specifically anything in particular, but generally very much so. Dan, if you want to add anything to that, please do go ahead.
No, I think you answered it just great, Jessica.
I'd like to sort of back Jessica up in that part of the role of the corporate office is to help provide the professional expertise in our particular fields. And that's part of how we support the SCA and we support the board and by bringing that to be able to assist the organisation. Thinking about it in a slightly different perspective, one of our questions, and I will admit a little bit of bias in taking this one because I'm saying hello to all of you from Lockhart. One of our members has asked if they might ask a more niche question, how did these procedures differ if the events being looked at happened in Lockhart or in the parts of Drachenwald in mundane Sweden and Finland, where they have a different mundane corporate body, so the different affiliate boards?
Okay, I got that one. Lockhart especially, New Zealand and Australia, their board is self-enclosed. They're not part of another kingdom. So the affiliate organizations, we have 7 all over the world. Their board is responsible for insurance. Their board is responsible for legal issues. If there's a clash between a modern law issue or the board themselves in, say, Austria or Germany or Sweden or Finland or the UK have problems, they have the ability to do things according to their legal needs. Basically, the affiliates, we all agree to follow corpora, but if something happens within a particular country or a particular affiliate responsibility, if they need a different procedure, if there are laws such as privacy, that's always a problem, always an issue, not a problem, just different ways of looking at it. The country's laws trump just about everything. They take precedence over everything. And that's how we do it. It oddly enough, in sanctions, most of the affiliates, including Drachenwald, don't seem to have as many sanctions as corporate SCA Inc. has. So if the problem comes up, it comes up rarely. But we totally cede authority in that to the boards over the particular countries where they have the job.
Okay, thank you. Quick reminder for everyone, we are coming to the end of our session and questions, so go ahead and get any last questions in that you guys want to ask. And yeah, we'll answer as much as we can. Okay, does there have to be concrete evidence or is witness testimony enough? And I'm going to assume this is part of the investigation process.
Okay, I'll answer that one. Actually, witness testimony in a court of law would be considered evidence. So yeah, witness testimony can be sufficient. If there is concrete evidence, we'd love to have it, but witnesses is also absolutely can be sufficient.
Thanks, Liz. It's one of those things as people just try and sort of build their understanding of the process, breaking down those myths. And I'd like to thank everyone for that.
I should add to that a little bit. I read a very good essay on this recently from an SCA member. There are two kinds of witnesses. There are material witnesses, which are testimony of things they've actually seen and have direct knowledge of or experienced, and they are considered evidentiary. And there are character witnesses, which are considered in a court of law immaterial. And the board will weigh things how the board will weigh, but my personal opinion, and I'm a former director, was always that character witnesses are not necessarily, because just because somebody's always been a good guy to you doesn't mean he's been a good guy to everybody. So that's my personal opinion on that. But I just want to add that because a lot of times people are saying somebody had X number of character witnesses. Well, yes, but we also have other stuff that indicates that the character witnesses saw a side that is not what the complainants saw. So that can happen too.
So I'd like to add something to that if I can. By the time we look at these packets when they come to the board, we have an investigative file. The investigator goes through and will interview the people. And sometimes the investigator will put clues there to say, I think this witness is very reliable. This witness didn't seem to understand what was going on or seem to have an agenda that they're working on. Sometimes we will hear things like that. Sometimes we get witness testimony that's very compelling and is of a detailed nature that really convinces us, even if there's one witness that they know what they're talking about. And other times we get several witnesses, and together the witness testimony that we get puts together a pattern that we can see moving from one to the other, and that also has an impact on what we're looking at the board level.
Thanks, Dan. So I'm thinking about the thing if we've gotten to the point where there has been a TRP issued, one of our questions that was asked was, what if someone's on a TRP and they go to an event venue and hang out in a public space, like a hotel lobby?
Yeah, I can handle this one too. And Liz, you can feel free to chime in if you want to. The bottom line is we don't control spaces that we don't control. If we have rent spaces or have spaces, we have some control over that. But public spaces, even that are next to them, then we really don't. And so we have very little that we can do. If someone who has been issued a TRP does actually come onto the property where we're holding an event, then we can ask them to leave. And if they don't leave, then we might ask the person who owns the event site if they can also tell them to leave. But we can't really force them. We can't put their arms behind their back and arm twist them and get them off of the site. If it really comes down to the point where someone who has been issued a TRP will not leave a site, and the event steward, in coordination with Seneschal or other person who is there, decide that this constitutes a danger to the participants, then they can shut the event down. I have never heard of that happening before, but they can do that. They can close the event and stop it right there, announce that the event is over, and shut everything down.
Okay, thank you. We've coming up on the end. So again, final questions, get them in. Why are awards and peerages not automatically stripped when an R&D is decided upon?
Oh, I want to handle this one too, if I can.
Of course.
So again, this goes back to the purpose of the sanction process. It's to protect the participants, and it's to protect the society. These are the things that are on our minds when we discuss these, like, for example, an R&D within the board. It's not really on our mind to try to punish the individual by stripping them of their peerages. We have done this on occasion. Rarely we have done this. It brings up a whole nest of issues that we really don't want to get into. The board reserves to itself the right to to strip rank and remove peerages. Don't even allow crowns to do that. And we definitely don't want to give that power to the crowns, because we just feel like that would put the crowns in a completely unenviable position, or either unenviable or tremendous power position that we just don't want to have them deal with. And so we reserve that right to the board. We don't allow ourselves to restore peerages. The Crowns have to do that if they feel that we made a misstep. But when we get in there, we just aren't thinking about that. So sometimes we'll get petitions from the kingdom and from the peerage orders within that kingdom. And sometimes we'll make a decision ourselves about whether or not we want to do this. But again, it's only in the most extreme of circumstances that we just go that route. We're just more thinking about the participants in the society, their safety and their well-being.
Thank you, Dan. And thank you to everyone. At this point, we're going to go into our wrap up, but I want to genuinely thank everyone who submitted questions. I'm going to let everyone say a few words, and then we will give you info on how to get involved in the next topical town hall, because we are continuing these. But for now, what I want is to give all of our panel participants a chance to just give you their takeaways and wrap up the evening a little bit. So I want to start with John. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Let me get my list. All right. First, I want to thank everybody for attending. If our email addresses are published, if you need to get in touch with any of us, please do. My job and sometimes Jessica's job is to help route things to the proper officer. The board ombudsman does the same. I urge everybody to don't hesitate to contact us. Also, one of the things that's coming up recently is, right now we found out during the virus issue and 7 months of shutdown that information is very important to all of us. So one of the things the board is probably going to be looking at in the future is whether or not we're going to remove the firewall from the SCA.org and make minutes and publications and newsletters and everything just available to anybody who wants to look at them. So that will probably come up in the near future. And if it does and it's asked for comments, feel free to comment, because personally, I think it's a pretty good thing to do. And again, thank you everybody for listening to us.
All right, Dan?
So, yeah, I want to add something just at the very end. Also, I want all the participants to understand that when we do look at extreme cases at the board level for potential revocation of membership and denial of participation, that all the people that are sitting around the table have been in the SCA for a long time. They care about a lot, and they've given a lot to the organization, and they know, they can put themselves in a position. What if this ever happened to me, or if I was ever in the hot seat? And so they spend an incredible amount of time reviewing the files that are given to us, which are often hundreds and hundreds of pages long, reading all of it, which the Society Seneschal and the investigative team puts together for us. They do a fantastic job doing that. And the process that they use in order to bring those packets to us, though that process is designed to lay facts in front of us so that we can make a reasonable and accurate decision about what is going on. We look at that very seriously. We have no desire to send people away that have put their heart and soul into this, and so we see it as a real, as a not a loss, as a failure of all of us to correct these problems sooner. Sometimes we just don't have the opportunity to do so, but well, we do, and we are never happy to do this. We do this only as we feel is a last resort to protect both the organization and the participants within it. And that's really, I just keep harping on that. That's really what the goal of this is to try to do that. And so, it's our desire on the board, first and foremost, to provide an environment that is safe and respectful, and that is a fun and a rich environment for all the participants that are there. That's the primary goal of what we're doing, and we try to do that every time we meet.
All right, thank you. Liz?
Okay, first, I just want to reiterate something John said earlier about the need for investigators. If you are a person who feels like you can deal with complex information and be very discreet about it, or you know somebody who is like that, who would be interested in doing what's a hard job, then feel free to get a hold of me or my investigative deputy, and perhaps we will be able to use you as an investigator. And I just want to thank everybody for coming and listening tonight. And I hope that people go away a little wiser about the processes than they came. They're constantly evolving. This is constantly a work in progress, and trying to improve it is an ongoing thing. Thank you.
All right. I just want to thank everyone. Thank you guys for coming. Thank you guys for your questions. Thank you to the panelists for being willing to go ahead and put yourself out there. I know that not everyone sits on Zoom on camera all the time, and I just really appreciate it. I've been super excited about these topical town halls. I do get a lot of questions about a lot of things, and I had a lot of questions about a lot of things. And I just think that this is a great opportunity for everyone to get those questions out there and get the right people in place to get answers. So that's going to be all for this evening. There will be future town halls. Brigid will talk more about how you can submit questions and topics. This town hall was on the investigatory process and sanctions. Future town halls can be on very different topics, and we will bring in the people who are best able to answer those questions. So please do, if you're curious about anything, if there's any misconceptions or anything like that, please do submit questions and topics, and we'll get up here and we'll do our best to talk about them.
Thanks, Jessica. We've really appreciated the time that you've all taken to really think about how we do the best job we can for the society. What are the things that we need to know, how we can make things better in the future. And I'd like to join Jessica in thanking all of our panelists tonight who've done a lot of prep work to make sure that they could give you the absolute best answers possible. For anyone who's wondering about how they actually submit questions for future town halls, the link is in the Facebook comments at the moment, but you can also find it on our website, scA.org, by searching Topical Town Halls. There's a form, it comes through, and we go through, and that way we can help identify clear themes that are coming of questions and make sure that we're prioritizing the things you really want to know. I will just do a quick plug for an upcoming event. Jessica and I, in the near future, will be doing a corporate office Ask Me Anything for DEI and social media. So stay tuned to see an announcement about that. And we are looking forward to being able to communicate with you all in this way more frequently. Thank you very much for your patience with any of our technical hassles. We are looking at making these more accessible, and we'll continue to do that for the future. This session will be uploaded to the Society's YouTube channel in the very near future. But I'd like to thank everyone for their time and say we look forward to seeing more of the known world in the future. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you, presenters. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.